B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Thursday, October 8th, 2020. Happy birthday to my brother Dan. Well, last night was the one and only vice presidential candidate debate held in Salt Lake City with big plexiglass barriers between Pence and Harris. And Kamala Harris, who has sharpened her skills as an interrogator, as a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, she famously made Jeff Sessions nervous. Well, she performed pretty well last night. But she didn't wipe those plexiglass partitions with Mike Pence, and going all the way back to the primary debates where she said that she was the one who could bring the indictment against Donald Trump if she had faced off with him in a debate. And after being named as Joe Biden's running mate, she bragged about her ability to take on Mike Pence, and she held her own. She scored some key hits. But I also felt that there were points where she was fumbling a little bit and points where she could have said things much more effective than what she actually said. But I'll start with this comment. Jane, who runs the office at my dentist's place, and I called, I'm going to take the risk and have my teeth cleaned in a week. Anyway, she wanted to talk about the debate, and she said, you know, the one thing I noticed is that Kamala Harris did not come off as an angry black woman. When Pence interrupted her, when he ran well past the time limits repeatedly, and when Pence attacked her, she generally responded with a smile. And that's depicted as condescending by Pence supporters and other critics over there at the Fox News channel. But given the choices that a woman of color, and a woman with her capabilities, and I am not a fan of Kamala Harris's performance as district attorney in San Francisco, which I watched closely, attorney general in California for 2 terms, which I watched pretty closely, and her brief tenure as a United States Senator, which I've also watched critically. I respect her as a bright and capable woman and a fresh face on the political scene. She tried to pull an Obama, an untested but attractive candidate who jumps a couple of levels to run for president after a brief stint in the Senate. And so overall, I give the win to Kamala Harris, who, by the way, on the Foxy News channel is always called Kamala. They mispronounce it intentionally, you can tell. And Mike Pence, who is a bit of a cipher. A lot of people don't recognize that he was a talk radio host before he ran for Congress and then was elected governor of Indiana, plucked out of that obscurity by Trump. He is a quite capable advocate for the Neanderthal positions that he holds. And he comes across as so much more compassionate, more spiritual than Trump does. He was able to thank Harris for the wonderful comments that she and Joe Biden had offered when they learned that Trump and Melania were positive with COVID. Pence acknowledged her, the special significance of being on the stage with the first woman of Asian and Jamaican descent. And so he's actually a little more insidious than Trump is, who, has no subtlety, has no control. Pence does have control over what he's saying, how he's saying it, and how long he talks. He obliterated the debate moderator, Susan Page, time and time again. Pence is also very skilled at not answering the question, and Harris ran a close second in many respects. She didn't dodge as many questions as obviously as Pence did, but she had her share. And Mike Pence, too, he did what he had to do. He showed total loyalty to the level of obsequiousness to his president. You never heard him refer to him in a personal way or as Donald or Don or anything like that. It's always the deep reverence for President Trump and his incredible accomplishments. The other thing that Pence studiously achieved is that he didn't upstage Donald Trump. There's nothing that pisses Trump off more than that. And he usually decapitates, if you can do that with a tweet, anyone who appears to get more attention than he does. So I think it was, in some ways, a little boring because it didn't have the moments that made our skins crawl just 8 days before, when Trump just went after Biden relentlessly and to his own discredit. And Harris did deliver some withering comments about the abject failure of the Trump administration on COVID. Quote, "The American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country." And she said they still don't have a plan. This administration has forfeited their right to re-election. And Pence's response was to claim that the Biden plan is little different from the Trump plan, and he got in a dig about plagiarism, something that Joe Biden knows something about. That's pretty standard fare. It's not the kind of below the belt. Well, you might call that below the belt, but Trump has lowered the belt so far that Pence seemed restrained in comparison. And one thing I'm really grateful for, Kamala Harris did not say one time that Joe Biden would build back better. And she didn't talk about malarkey. So I have a bunch of comments here that I'm just glancing at as I talk to you. One of the things that was really curious is that the issue came up about the Supreme Court, about ramming through the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett. And on that, while Harris's first answer did mention abortion rights, did focus on eviscerating Obamacare, that they're coming for you to take away your protection from pre-existing conditions and to cut off the age deadline of 26, where you can stay on your parents' policy up until that point. But when it came to the issues of the alleged scheme of the Democrats to expand the number of members of the U.S. Supreme Court and pack it with liberals, and this is something that is a straw man that has been generated by the Republicans. And they even gild the lily by saying, well, they're going to give statehood to the District of Columbia, statehood to Puerto Rico so that they can get 4 more Democrat senators. And none of this is based on anything solid. The last comments we heard about packing the court were from Pete Buttigieg during some of the primary debates. And so for Harris to dodge that question just like Biden did last week, I think is silly. I think they should just be coy and say, well, you know, that's a policy idea. Buttigieg brought it up. Some academics have talked about it. But this campaign is focused on winning the election, and we have not contemplated that. That's a simple way to dismiss that straw man. But instead, she brought up an anecdote about Abraham Lincoln that may or may not be true, and then she dodged the question, obviously, by talking about the way the Republicans, since Trump was elected, have packed the lower courts with unqualified white guys. And that was a valid criticism. But because she didn't answer the question, and the guy who dodged virtually every question, her opponent said, I want the record to show that she didn't answer the question just like Biden didn't. I think that was an unnecessary self-inflicted wound. But it's clear that she was coached not to answer that question. And likewise, as we'll get to in a moment, when it comes to fracking, Harris gratuitously said Joe Biden will not ban fracking. Now, he has said he would ban fracking on public lands. But that was another opportunity for Fox fact-checkers, such as they are. They're more opposition researchers. But they dug up videotape of Kamala from the primary debates saying that she would ban fracking. So I'm going to share with you the comments that the New York Times pundits offered about the debate and offer my own comments on that. African-American Jamel Bowie said it was a tie. I don't think there was a winner. Both Pence and Harris came to Utah with a specific job to do. For Pence to put the Trump administration's record in the best possible light, for Harris to present Biden's most popular policies and hit Trump on his handling of the pandemic, and they both did what they had to do. Elizabeth Brunig gave the edge to Kamala Harris. Pence may be evangelical, but he's not charismatic, she said. Christopher Buskirk. Pence won this debate. He was calm, professional, competent, focused. He was in some sense the answer to every criticism leveled at Trump after the last debate. A lot of the MAGA base is lukewarm about Pence, but he earned their respect. More importantly, he looks purpose-built to reassure wavering Trump supporters and undecideds in battleground states. Linda Chavez. Harris was the clear winner. The moderator, Susan Page, struggled, allowing Pence to run over repeatedly, but Harris was better at parrying Pence than Biden was at parrying Trump, and she did a better job demanding equal time. And I have to say I was surprised because having watched the debate, my impression was that Pence did get more time. He just elbowed his way into it. But when the final clocks were tallied, it appears that they got almost equal time, like within 15 or 30 seconds of each other. Gail Collins, Kamala Harris. And then she blurts out the truth. Nobody's going to be talking about this debate in 2 days. Michelle Cottle, Harris has serious debate chops. She knows how to eviscerate an opponent without looking nasty. She had a massive advantage here because Pence was defending the indefensible. As much as he tried to spin, dodge, and lie his way through questions about issues like climate change, Trump's dishonesty, and the administration's response to coronavirus, there just wasn't much he could do. As his boss would say, it is what it is. Ross Douthat, he sides with Mike Pence. He said you have to take into account degree of difficulty. Pence's task was to normalize the presidency of Trump after its most insane week. Well, that's a fair point. Let's pick one here. One more. Matt Labosh. Mike Pence won. Full disclosure, I wanted to loathe Pence because I so often do on automaton grounds. The plexiglass erected around him served as a rebuke of the administration's non-response to the pandemic. The glass was just as stiff as Pence, but more transparent. That's a good line. Making me feel as though I was visiting a Golden Corral sneeze-guarded salad bar. This guy's funny, at least. But where was this ferocious prosecutor, Kamala Harris, that we were warned of? She was smiley and warm. I would like her if she were hosting a Lifetime talk show, but she failed to cut off the ring, to bite down hard, to bludgeon Pence with facts, when so many of the facts were on her side. And that is a fair criticism. While she did have a strong answer about the failure on coronavirus, she didn't detail how last spring governors were fighting with each other, competing for the same damn masks and supplies of other PPE and ventilators. And she allowed Pence to rewrite history by suggesting that the China travel ban was pivotal, when we know just how incomplete it was, and how they didn't even bother to test or contact trace the people, the 40,000 who flew in from China after that ban was announced. And I credit a couple of writers at BuzzFeed for noting this. It's Ryan Brooks and Catherine Miller. Harris and Pence talked about everything except the last 6 days. The debate barely touched on the chaos of these past 8, 10, 14 days. And in particular, the bizarre behavior of the comb-over-in-chief. At another point where Harris could have scored was when they were both asked about a potential transfer of power because of the elderly men that they're running with. And this would be an opportunity for Harris to say that Pence should have invoked the 25th Amendment when Trump went into the hospital, and to clearly say that she's talked with Joe Biden about what happens if he expires or resigns due to health issues after the possible election of Biden. And now I'm turning to commentary from a couple of writers at the New York Times. They write, Pence, stripped of most politically palatable explanations for the White House pandemic response, set off on a curious charge when Harris said the Trump team's leadership clearly has not worked. He chose to hear it as a direct affront to the American people. And that was an interesting ploy. It wasn't very convincing, but it probably worked on the bobblehead wearing a MAGA hat. And later they write, perhaps the reality is simply too bleak for any administration to explain away entirely. Trump's behavior since leaving the hospital Monday appears to be a continuation of the kind of scientifically dubious happy talk that has left the Trump-Pence ticket at significant polling disadvantage 4 weeks before Election Day. And here's an honest comment. Facing Pence, Harris was very much the candidate Democrats might remember from her own presidential run. Undeniable talent, and more than a few ably deployed pre-planned attacks, mixed with sporadic shakiness when there was no obvious script to follow, including an evasive exchange about adding seats to the Supreme Court, as I alluded to just a moment ago. And I want to tell you that I have taken the practice recently of flipping over to Fox News after these debates just to see how they spin them. And boy, the machine was in spin mode last night, just like my washing machine. And I flipped on, and there's Sean Hannity with Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And then her daddy, former Arkansas governor and former presidential candidate Mike, give me my guitar, Huckabee. He was on a panel with some weird guy I've never heard of named Lewis, and with Geraldo Rivera. And Hannity and the two other guests ganged up on Geraldo because he had the temerity to offer an honest assessment that Kamala Harris served herself well in this debate. They ridiculed him. He pulled off his glasses, and Huckabee said, you got to report to the ophthalmologist tomorrow for a new prescription. You didn't see the same debate we did. And they had a whole stack of pre-planned attacks. Again, it's based on opposition research of Harris on fracking, on the court question dodge, on raising taxes if they repeal the Trump tax cuts. And she did allow Pence to get away twice with saying that the Trump tax cuts delivered either $2,000 or $4,000 to average American households, when we know the vast majority of those cuts went to corporate interests and the top 1%. The Democrats seem to be afraid of identifying the income and wealth gap that has grown exponentially in this country. A couple of minutes ago, I mentioned about how Harris defended Biden's position, saying that he will not end fracking. And David Sirota did a good job in his newsletter today, the Daily Poster, where he said, well, look, this is all focused on Pennsylvania, where fracking has been a source of jobs and economic performance. But a January poll, this is not fresh, this goes all the way back to January, of Pennsylvania voters, shows that more believe the environmental risks of natural gas drilling outweigh the economic benefits. That's 49 to 38%. The same poll found that more registered voters favor a ban on fracking, 48%, than oppose it, 39%. And the poll showed that 54% of voters in the populous suburban swing counties of southeast Pennsylvania support a ban. And that's where the Democratic votes are in Pennsylvania. A separate survey in August found that 50% of Pennsylvania voters have an unfavorable view of the fracking industry. Only 32% have a favorable view. And the numbers were even worse for fracking industry CEOs, who were viewed unfavorably by 53% and favorably by only 21% of Pennsylvania voters. And, of course, I realize that these battleground states are critical, but in some cases, this is fighting the last election. We don't know if Pennsylvania voters are going to go for Trump in the narrow margin that was run up in 2016. And so I think that this is a mistake on the part of the Democrats. And Biden, you know, he's just desperate to maintain this moderate position and to try to reduce any barriers to independents and some Republicans crossing over to vote for him. The strategy clearly is, I'm not Trump, and that's all you need to know. So Susan Page from USA Today, who tried to moderate the debate, I thought she was better than Chris Wallace, and certainly not facing the, high-octane barrage of insults, interruptions, and lies that were coming from Trump. Pence did not attempt that. He just tried to gum everything to death and run out the clock and then keep talking after the clock had run out. And Page has faced criticism for failing to ask enough follow-up questions or cut short Pence. And I was screaming, I'm sure you were too, where is the microphone switch? Even if the moderator doesn't have control of it, you can yell at the control room, turn off his microphone, his time is up. But they're too polite to do that. And I won't go into a lengthy comment here, but this is one of the curses of the Presidential Commission on Debates, or is it the Commission on Presidential Debates? It is a corporate-funded sop. It's a way for the networks to kind of distance themselves from managing the debates so that losers can't piss all over them later and winners can't take it out on them. But we've got a serious problem with the way we manage debates in the primaries, which are like, sports center operations. And we clearly have a problem with the way these debates are being managed. And we'll get to the current battle over the next debates in a moment. But first, our dear leader, who has miraculously recovered from his diagnosis with COVID-19. Like Jesus, he spent 3 days behind the rock and came out just like he, is completely cured. And many of us wonder if he won't have a relapse when the drugs wear off, when the steroids are cut off. But Trump is in a deeply manic phase, even for him. And they released a new video yesterday that is, it's pretty damn funny. Because Trump speaks to the seniors Yes, they are his favorite Americans.
To my favorite people in the world, the seniors. I'm a senior. I know you don't know that.
We didn't?
Nobody knows that. Maybe you don't have to tell them, but I'm a senior.
That's the drugs talking.
We are making tremendous progress with this horrible disease that was sent over by China. China will pay a big price for what they did to the world and to us. But we have medicines right now, and I call them a cure. I went into the hospital a week ago. I was very sick, and I took this medicine, and it was incredible.
So this is interesting. It's his first admission that he was very sick. But he needs to use that to set the stage for the resurrection miracle that he is claiming has occurred. And, of course, he had access to Regeneron's monoclonal antibodies because one of his golfing buddies is the head of Regeneron.
It was incredible. I could have walked out the following day sooner. It was incredible the impact it had. And we're going to make that and others that are similar to it, almost identical, we're going to make them available immediately. We have an emergency use authorization that I want to get signed immediately. The FDA has moved at a level that they've never moved before. Things that would take 2, 3, 4 years are taking a matter of weeks or even sooner than that. And that's because of me.
So, really? Now, this is fascinating because in releasing this video on Twitter this morning, Trump is returning the focus to him after he could have stayed quiet for the day and let Mike Pence, who is perceived by Trump supporters to have won the debate last night, to let people just revel in that. And instead, he's back me, me, me. He is speaking to seniors because the polls show that they have defected from supporting Trump in droves, and he is trying to shore that up. He knows the polls also show that their number one concern is his handling of coronavirus. So this is a remarkable video. You hear how fast he is speaking. His breathing is labored. And I hear that clearly as a combination of the illness and the drugs. I will include a link in the show file for today's podcast to the video so you can watch it for yourselves. But Mother Jones Magazine raises an important point. When you look closely at the video, it's pretty clear that he green screened it. That's a video special effect where you talk to the camera and you stand with a green backdrop behind you, and then in post-production, they replace that green screen with any video called B-roll that they happen to have. So they pose Trump, and the background that the green screen inserted was as if he were on the White House lawn. But experts who they interviewed looked very carefully and examined the video, and the trees and shrubs in the background appear to be on about a 10-second loop. They just keep repeating. And why they chose to do that, I don't know. But that's what's going on over there in White House reality concoction land. And David Dayen, who publishes a daily update called Unsanitized, the COVID-19 report, he says, this is the first time I can remember that Trump has admitted the reality of the timeline and that a vaccine will not be the October surprise. He has blamed politics, but it's clearly due to the FDA safety guidelines requiring Phase 3 trial participants to be observed for 2 months before the drug companies can seek emergency approval. So Trump is now on to the next thing, trying to tell you that, he's got the miracle cure. It's just more blue sky, and that's what Trump has been pumping since February. So this is a fascinating sequence. It's kind of the Trump show, just the latest installment. And he didn't say who's going to approve the funding to give away free Regeneron treatments, but they're not cheap. I also have to remark that if you look at the makeup of Trump's recent videos, they're putting on extra orange. And on CNN last night, Don Lemon cracked that when he came back from watching a Trump video, he's darker than me. Also, I noticed, and my partner Kathy too, that there appears to be some swelling under his right eye. And we don't know if Melania clocked him or if it's just a side effect to the powerful drugs that he is taking. So, his special treatment is good for him. And Trump loves to highlight what is good for him. But Dr. Peter Chin Hong, an infectious disease specialist here at the University of California at San Francisco Health Center, said in his opinion, there is 1,000,000% no chance that the Regeneron treatment could have cured Trump in 24 hours, as Trump has claimed. Another explanation, he said, is that the president is experiencing the effects of the steroid dexamethasone, which he began receiving on Saturday, which is known to reduce fever, can create feelings of well-being and euphoria. This is all in keeping with the dexamethasone speaking, said Dr. Chin Hong. And the guy we can't trust, the presidential doctor, Sean Conley, he said the president's oxygen and respiratory levels were normal and stable, and that blood drawn from him on 2 days ago, that would have been Tuesday, showed the presence of antibodies for the coronavirus. Well, that's from the Regeneron, dude. It's too soon for his own internal system to be generating that. So the manic stable genius went on television today with Maria Bartiromo. She's always tough, just like Sean Hannity. And he twice referred to Kamala Harris as a monster. So that's, I guess, an upgrade from some of the nasty remarks that he's made about nasty women. But he went on to attack two of his most loyal cabinet members, Bill Barr for not delivering the October surprise on the exposure of Russiagate, and Mike Pompeo and Christopher Wray, the FBI director. And this is classic Trump. On COVID, he describes himself as a leader who took the hit for the team. Now he's sharing his remarkable experience with the little people. But in almost every other respect, he's a victim. Even of people who he has appointed and who have been there to cover his ass and even wipe it whenever that was demanded of them. So Trump says that the FBI director has been disappointing because he won't join the Trump chorus in declaring that voting by mail is risky and will be rigged. And it's Pompeo and Barr who aren't carrying enough water on the Russiagate issue. And to go a little deeper here on the quotes, here was Trump calling Senator Harris, this monster that was on stage with Mike Pence, who destroyed her last night, by the way, but this monster, I thought that it wasn't even a contest last night. She was terrible. I don't think you could get worse, and totally unlikable, and she is. She's a communist, he added. So he is in a high gear. Emphasis on high. And then he went on to tell Bartiromo that it was the Gold Star families who infected him. It wasn't the Rose Garden debut of Amy Coney Barrett, even though no Gold Star family members, even those who in a receiving line went up and talked to Trump in close proximity. And he said, well, these are Gold Star families. I can't say back up, stand 10 feet. I just can't do that. And I went through like 35 people, and everyone had a different story. So to be clear, we have at least 10 people who have tested positive, who are in the Rose Garden, and some of whom got repeat exposures to Trump in the debate prep. That was the day after the Gold Star families. That would be Chris Christie, Stephen Miller, and campaign manager Bill Stepien. Oh, and Kellyanne. Just to reiterate, leader of the Gold Star families, quote, considering it's been 12 days since the event, all Gold Star families are doing well and exhibit no symptoms of COVID-19. And Trump doesn't care that he doesn't know what he's talking about, or even when he contradicts himself. He's oblivious to that. He's always just relentlessly pushing his bullshit message of the moment without any concern for what he said even 5 minutes ago. NBC and the Washington Post are reporting that when Trump went to the hospital last November 16th, he went over to Walter Reed without any notice to the hospital. He just showed up there. And before he would agree to be treated for whatever it was, he claims it was part of a physical, and that is it's just obvious bullshit. Well, he mandated that physicians and non-medical staff had to sign non-disclosure agreements before he would submit to treatment for whatever it was he was there for. At least 2 doctors at Walter Reed refused to sign those NDAs, and they were not permitted to provide any care to Trump during that visit. So the other issue that was back and forth between the campaigns today is about the next debates. Now, there are 2 scheduled, one for October 15th in Miami. It's supposed to be a town hall format, and then a final one on October 22nd. But after the Commission on Presidential Debates announced that they would stage next week's debate virtually, Trump said, no. He said, I don't have time for here it is. I'm not going to waste my time on a virtual debate. That's not debating what debating is all about. You sit behind a computer and do a debate. It's ridiculous. They can cut you off at any time. And it's the cutoff part that's the deal breaker for the genius of the deal. So I'll try to compress this for you, but let me just bottom line it for you that this is unresolved. Is Trump bluffing? He needs these debates, not only for his narcissistic feed, but because he's running behind. And he believes that he did a great job in the first debate, and that if he's given 2 more cracks at Joe Biden, that he'll just turn him into a puddle on the floor. And Biden actually said, we don't know what the president's going to do. He changes his mind every second. And that is true. So the dueling is over whether they delay next week's debate until Trump is presumably healthier and less infectious. Or one plan was to delay that and cancel the third one. Trump's campaign manager from quarantine, Bill Stepien, said, well, yeah, we can delay a week and then we'll do the last one on October 29th. And Biden said, we didn't agree to that. So it's a ping-pong game right now, and we'll know when we know. And meanwhile, the White House has said that any day now, Trump is going to be back on the campaign trail. And he says, well, you know, when I do these mob rallies, it doesn't matter because I stand by myself very far away from everybody. That's not really true. There are always these, lineups of fans like wallpaper who stand behind him. And they may be more than 6 feet away, but if he is contagious, who wants to be within 20 miles of this son of a bitch? So I don't know if the MAGA crowd will just say he's our fearless president. He took one for the team, and by golly, if he comes to my town, I'll show up at that airplane hangar and take my chances. So Nancy Pelosi has been dropping several hints that tomorrow she is going to announce the formation of some sort of commission to examine the 25th Amendment and see if there are grounds to remove the president, even temporarily, because of his condition. And Pelosi also said that she will not agree to a standalone aid package for airlines unless the Trump administration commits to a broader pandemic relief plan. And while Trump claims to be this grand negotiator, I give Pelosi high marks. She knows how to rope this dope. And so, when he blew up the negotiations on Monday, said we're not going to talk to her anymore. And then the next day he said, well, how about airline relief and $1,200 checks? And so she played along with that and then delivered a kind of body blow today, saying no, there is no standalone bill without a bigger bill. And she is in the driver's seat. Trump can decree and executive order everything he wants. But you can't pass a spending bill that doesn't pass the House of Representatives. Meanwhile, unemployment benefits have kept millions of families afloat, and the benefits are running out in many states. Last week was the 29th week for the first round of people who got on unemployment in March. In many states, it expires after 26 weeks. The federal money extended it for additional 13 weeks. But because the Congress didn't authorize more money for the $600 or any other amount of additional unemployment payments, they're relying on the paltry $300 or up to $400 a week that Trump is stealing from FEMA budgets. And I don't have any indication that any of that money has actually reached the bank account of a single unemployed person. And that reminds me of one other thing I wanted to point out about Kamala Harris, is that she did not, in the debate last night, describe the perils that average American families are facing, because there are more layoffs every week. People are losing their employer-paid health care because of that. And those same people are facing eviction. And I believe she really should have driven that home in her commentary at the debate last night. The FBI has announced that they have foiled a plot. 6 men who describe themselves as anti-government militia members had been scheming to kidnap the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, because of her egregious imposition of a lockdown followed by mask requirements that they consider to be tyranny. And some of these people, now suspects, were participants in the standoff at the state capitol back in April, when they demanded that Governor Whitmer reopen Michigan. And they brought their guns with them to underscore the seriousness of their demands. So the FBI learned about this group by intercepting encrypted messages and because they had undercover agents and confidential informants working with the group. Well, while I often deplore the use of these informants and undercover sting operations, I mostly object to the way they've framed hundreds of Muslim Americans for dubious accusations of intending to commit domestic terrorism. So it's about fucking time that the FBI used those same tactics on an armed white extremist group. The authorities say that 2 of the men decided to unite others to take violent action against state governments that they thought were violating the Constitution. The FBI said that a guy named Fox had talked of storming the Michigan State House with 200 men and trying Whitmer for treason. They also scoped out her summer home, where she was taking some time off in August, and thought about kidnapping her from there. They also had secret meetings in the basement of a vacuum cleaner store in Grand Rapids, where the owner, Brian Titus, said that he had hired Fox, a childhood friend. Let's get Fox's first name for you here. Let me turn the page. Adam Fox is the man in question. And Titus said that he had given him work, a place to stay in that basement after he was kicked out of his girlfriend's home. I felt sorry for him, but I didn't know he was capable of doing this. This is almost insane, Titus said. I knew he was in a militia, but there's a lot of people in a militia that don't plan to kidnap the governor. I mean, give me a break. And these are the same people that Trump was cheering on with tweets like "Liberate Michigan." And these efforts were stoked by right-wing rich people who provided funding and coordination for these liberation movements that popped up all over the country, just like AstroTurf. Every day I pause for a minute to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. People like Billy Cook, Cheryl Fleming, Ethan Knox, and Paul Goodman. They chip in between $5 and $20 a month. You can do it too. Time's running out. Your humble host is retiring after the election is resolved. So if you care to support it, all you got to do is visit peterbcollins.com/sign up. Here's a surprise, and one where I'm going to just say I support Joe Biden 100%. Doesn't mean I'll vote for him, but in a little noticed announcement a few days ago that was picked up by the Middle East Eye, Joe Biden has pledged to end the United States support for Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen if he's elected. In a statement on the campaign website, under Biden-Harris administration, we will reassess our relationship with the Saudi Arabian kingdom, end U.S. support for Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen, and make sure America does not check its values at the door to sell arms or buy oil. Good for you, Joe. I have no quibble with that. So Facebook has made a curious announcement. As you know, earlier this year they said, we're not going to accept any political ads during the final week before the election, which is a ridiculous position to take because, for example, I have already voted here in California. So any ads that run during the last week are going to have zero impact on me and millions of other voters all across the country. Now they've announced that after November 3rd, they will not be accepting political ads at all for an unspecified period of time. Now, what point is there to banning ads when there's no election underway? I mean, do they think we're that stupid? Senator Elizabeth Warren, quote, the change is too little too late. The changes are performative. And the Internet freedom group Fight for the Future said in a tweet, this change isn't going to fix the problem at all. And as I've pointed out before, the big losers in this ban on political ads on Facebook are local races, like for your town council, where Facebook is perfect because $10 can hit 500 or 1,000 people, and you can super target the geographical area where your candidate is running. This makes no sense whatsoever. As I promised yesterday, I wanted to detail a little bit the action by Democrats on a Judiciary Committee subcommittee focused on antitrust. They released a 450-page report on Tuesday, and the bottom line is they're calling for more antitrust action against Silicon Valley companies. And some of it is prospective, that Facebook couldn't buy Instagram in the future. And that may be worthwhile. But I believe these companies have gotten too big, and we need serious regulation. And just breaking them up really doesn't change the monopoly power that Google has over search or that Facebook has over Facebook and Instagram social media. So Democratic proposals include banning major tech platforms from acquiring future startups or potential rivals and selling competing products like Amazon. You know, they pull punches on their vendors and create competing items of the same type that they sell at a lower price. The report also calls on Congress to grant federal antitrust enforcers new resources to police possible abuses by major firms. And frankly, I don't think so much of this. I think we need to regulate each of these companies individually, because the rules for Facebook really don't apply to the search vagaries and the way ads are served by Google. Twitter is its own crazy little animal. So I I'm glad to see there's some effort to identify the problems. But unless there is a real serious effort and the Democrats control both houses and the White House next year, I don't see much prospect of any significant action. Here's today's COVID-19 update, edited by Linda Lewis. Worldwide, we're at 36 million cases, total deaths reported at 1.057 million. In the United States, the cases estimated at 7.5 million, total deaths 212,000 now. Yesterday's report, 52,000 new cases in the U.S., 994 deaths. And as I've pointed out, the pattern over the last 6 weeks has been low death counts early in the week with higher numbers toward the end of the week. And I can't explain why the distribution of this phenomenon occurs at those rates. The case-demic in Europe is creeping up, and it is more than a case-demic. Hospitalizations are rising as well. The number of coronavirus cases exceeded 6 million in Europe on Wednesday. The continent is experiencing rising COVID-19 fatigue. The surge is reported in the United Kingdom, France, Italy, Spain, and Germany, with records set in several European countries over the past week. This has prompted countries to introduce further measures, tighten restrictions in order to combat these increases in cases. In the United States, cases were up 6% compared to the week before. We're now averaging about 44,000 new infections reported daily. Last week, the pace of infections went up in 23 states, plus the District of Columbia, and only declined in 4 states and Puerto Rico. Infections are rising in New York, and just 4 states, Hawaii, Kansas, North Carolina, and South Carolina, saw the pace of new infections slow over the past week. Los Angeles has a new uptick in reported cases, and these are as a percentage of testing, so that the numbers of tests are not as significant a driver of these increased numbers. And Wisconsin is a hot spot, where Governor Tony Evers announced yesterday that a field hospital will be opened at the state fairgrounds near Milwaukee. And as of Tuesday, they had 853 COVID-19 patients hospitalized in Wisconsin, and only 16% of their hospital beds are vacant right now. So they are reaching a critical point. We mentioned earlier about Trump's demand of non-disclosure agreements from Walter Reed's staff, and we have more details. This goes back to this unexplained visit last November. NBC broke the story that Trump required the NDAs. The White House described the incident as part of a routine checkup, but there were multiple signs the visit was hastily arranged. Trump mandated signed NDAs from both physicians and non-medical staff, most of whom are active military service members. And we'll go a little bit into the weeds here because the rules, both the federal law called HIPAA, which blocks the disclosure of personal health information by people in the medical profession, and also that military officers or members of the services, they have their own confidentiality rules. And so this NDA seems to be irrelevant, but Trump has used NDAs and believes that people should be held to them, even when he's tried to cover up what many people believe has been criminal behavior. So HIPAA does not prohibit government access to medical records. The Electronic Frontier Foundation has noted that HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, went into effect in 2003, and it includes a national security exception that permits doctors, hospitals, and others to disclose individual health information to authorized federal officials for the conduct of lawful intelligence, counterintelligence, and other national security activities. So this will probably be the end of this episode, but it is interesting that once again Trump has covered up what should be, at least, unless he had a sexually transmitted disease, should be a matter of some public disclosure. We mentioned that Pelosi has announced that tomorrow she'll have more about her plan to pursue the temporary removal of the president under the 25th Amendment. And we'll see exactly what that entails. Also, this was not reported by the New York Times today, but I saw it on Twitter, and then Linda dug this up from the publication called The Hill. A man named Creed Bailey, who heads the White House Security Office, has been in the hospital and is described as gravely ill from COVID-19. Now, what's crucial is, when did Creed Bailey go into the hospital? We don't have an exact date. But according to Bloomberg, Bailey grew sick before the Rose Garden event on September 26th. And some sources trace it back to the arrival of a contingent from Israel headed by Benjamin Netanyahu for the event that touted the Abraham Accords falsely as a peace deal. Yesterday, the New England Journal of Medicine, without naming the current president, denounced his administration's handling of the COVID pandemic and called for voting out our current political leaders who are dangerously incompetent. It is the first time the Journal has ever weighed in on an election. A couple of quotes here. When it comes to the response to the largest public health crisis of our time, our current political leaders have demonstrated that they are dangerously incompetent. We should not abet them and enable the deaths of thousands more Americans by allowing them to keep their jobs. We have failed at almost every step. We had ample warning, but when the disease first arrived, we were incapable of testing effectively, couldn't provide even the most basic personal protective equipment to healthcare workers, and we continue to be way behind the curve in testing. Our current leaders have undercut trust in science and in government, causing damage that will certainly outlast them. And over at Mint Press News, Raul Diego exposes some developments at Stanford University here in the Bay Area that he says epitomize the military-industrial complex. And at the heart of it is a for-profit company that is getting support from the military and from DARPA, that's the Defense Department's Research and Development Agency, and In-Q-Tel, the CIA's venture capital fund. And all this is wrapped up in an effort to develop an implantable chip. Yes, you would insert it like my dog Chloe has an ID chip. And humans would carry this permanently, and it would enable state-of-the-art diagnostics, including, they say, for the coronavirus. So I think it's a fascinating exposure of what is underway right now involving your tax dollars, and ultimately private companies will profit from it. And as I wrap up today, a couple of quick updates on the summer of rage and race relations in this country. Yesterday, the Milwaukee District Attorney declined to prosecute a police officer who fatally shot an armed black teenager in a mall parking lot this past February. The police officer in question is African-American Joseph Mensah. He's in the Wauwatosa Police Department. That's a suburb 5 miles west of Milwaukee. And he shot the black teenager Alvin Cole after he refused to put down a gun and ran away from the police following a confrontation at the Mayfair Mall. Now, based on this description, the young man had a gun, he ran away, and it's not clear that he posed any threat to the officer. And an angry crowd of protesters pointed out that this is the third time in 5 years that prosecutors have chosen not to file charges against the same cop for fatally shooting someone. Derek Chauvin, the man who was caught on video with his knee on George Floyd's neck until he expired, he was released from the Hennepin County Jail after posting bail of $100,000 yesterday. Their conditions: he has to attend all court appearances, can't have any direct or indirect contact with members of the Floyd family, can't work in law enforcement or security, and cannot possess a firearm or ammunition. The Attorney General, Daniel Cameron in Kentucky, has had an about-face. Last week he said, yeah, we're going to release the grand jury tapes and any member of the grand jury can publicly speak. But now he has filed a motion to bar an unidentified grand juror in the Breonna Taylor case from speaking about the proceedings. This motion came the same day as the city of Louisville released a trove of documents from the police department's internal investigation into the shooting, which shows that the basis for the warrant, which was that the former boyfriend of Breonna Taylor, what's his name, Jamarcus Glover, had been picking up packages delivered to Taylor's home. But the evidence shows that Louisville had bad relations with the local postal inspection service, so they asked a friendly cop in a nearby department in Shively, Kentucky, to contact the postal inspector, who told them no boxes were delivered to Taylor on behalf of Glover. So there was at least disagreement among the cops, who nevertheless went to a court and certified that the packages has been delivered in order to get the no-knock midnight warrant that was used to bust down the door and led to the firing of more than 20 shots, one of which killed Breonna Taylor. And finally, even here in San Francisco, we are having more problems with our police department, a lack of honesty and transparency. And last year, they raided the home of journalist Brian Carmody, breaking the law, and nothing really happened. And now civil rights organizations have filed suit saying that San Francisco police illegally tapped into a network of 400 surveillance cameras that are controlled by a local group, but not the city, not the police department. It's a group of merchants. And this explicitly violates a law that was passed by the Board of Supervisors in 2019, banning the cops from using, borrowing, or acquiring surveillance technology. The cops say, well, we asked for access, but we didn't actually use it. Only documents that have now been disclosed show that this merchant district allowed police access for 48 hours, and the cops thanked them for their cooperation. And thank you for listening to my daily news and comment podcast all the way to the end here. I appreciate your determination and your pluck. You'll find this podcast on YouTube. You can share it with absolutely everyone. And I remain Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.